Hello everybody. It's Tuesday. That means it must be Urban Manifesto. Welcome everybody to the latest Urban Manifesto webinar. I'm Lucy Bullivant, place strategist and the founder of urbanista.org web scene for livable urbanism. And together with my colleague Prathima Manohar, the founder of the Urban Vision think tank, this year we created Urban Manifesto, which is an exciting new series of weekly webinars. In each episode, we present the personal manifestos of expert guests from across different disciplines and backgrounds, manifestos for happier, healthier, more livable, and that means more equitable and resilient urban futures. We then explore the issues in a Q&A, and we invite you, our audience, to ask them questions. Now, the pandemic crisis has accelerated what was already a huge need to change course on every front. The demands to transition safely into a new era are massive. And this whole thing has provoked really profound questions concerning the identities, the policies, and the processes of urban design, planning, architecture, development, and many related disciplines in the social and the physical sciences. So in helping to meet the challenges brought about by the pandemic and the climate emergency together, separate things but interrelated things, and to nurture a genuinely livable future, Urban Manifesto offers you opportunities to learn, but also to think about unlearning old ways which have really lost their relevance or which are downright unhelpful in this pivotal point in the 21st century. So with Urban Manifesto, we're tackling a myriad of themes ranging from co-housing to healthy buildings. Is density a boon or bane? Sustainable finance, you name it. Making cities more mobile, many others. And we've started to build an exciting focus on pioneering plans for specific neighborhoods and specific cities globally. This summer, London, Copenhagen and Berlin were the first three that we dealt with in this way in one particular episode. So we would love you to keep watching our episodes as we bring together the Urban Manifesto, urban research roadmap for progressive, resilient and responsible urban change. You can watch all the episodes we've made to date on YouTube and Facebook if you look under the Urban Vision. And if you've enjoyed our episodes, and we hope that you have, please tell all your friends or your friends who you think may be interested to take a look, because knowledge is power. And we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that created them. Who said that? Einstein famously said that. So Prathima is going to introduce today's guest and our theme. Over to you.
Thank you, Lucy, and welcome everyone to the new episode of Urban Manifesto, where we've been identifying ideas and agendas for building a more inclusive, happier, and livable urban future. And today we are discussing the idea of nature-based solutions to make a greener, healthier urban future. And this strategy is now being adopted around the world in urban areas to not just enhance resilience, but to increase the health of city dwellers, as well as to support the agenda of tackling climate change. And we're so thrilled today to have Mette Skjold. She's the principal of SLA, whom I had the great opportunity of meeting and visiting in Copenhagen a few years ago. And SLA creates modern adaptable cities that inspire community and diversity through innovative use of nature, design, sustainability, and technology. And we're so thrilled, Mette, to have you with us today. How have you been this crazy topsy-turvy year?
Thank you so much, Prathima, and thank you, Lucy, for a super nice introduction. And thank you so much for the invitation for us to join here at the Urban Vision. It's an honor. And you're doing a super nice set of works. We are good here in Copenhagen. The amount of positive corona tested people is increasing. So right now, parallel to this webinar, there's a a live streaming from the government in Denmark. I haven't seen the new regulations so far, but they are at least maturing that they will regulate even more, at least here in the capital region of Denmark. But nonetheless, SLA is doing very well. It's a nice group of people, and I'm super honored to be part of SLA in general. They are performing very good in these super hard times. I would maybe like to put on the slides. Will you do that for me?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
I know you prepared a few slides to outline the agenda of cities of nature. So I am going to share that with our audience.
That's very nice. Thank you. Probably it will take a little longer than 3 minutes, but I'll flip through it briefly. Cities of nature. This is actually a temporary parking lot. You see a nurse or a doctor going from her car into a hospital. And I'm sure that through this climate adaptation through nature-based design, she will be more inspired, but also more in contact with herself as a whole person when she enters into the hospital to her work. Yes, next. So we 2 years ago made a manifest called that cities should feel and function as a forest. And that refers to that we don't mimic nature. We don't just invite nature into the cities, but we study, research, and gather knowledge on what nature can perform in our cities. So it's much more about the sensation, the experience, and the hardcore performance of ecosystem services in our cities. Oh, yes. Air pollution is a rapid increasing, you could say, problem that our cities are struggling with. And to be a little bit more cynic on that, during the first phase of COVID-19, for every one person that passed away during the pandemic as cause of COVID-19, 20 people are being survived through less air pollution in our cities. So this is a huge challenge that we need to take care of. Next. And this is just numbers from Europe. We are experiencing still more extreme weather events. Can be drought, can be skyfalls or cloudbursts of rain. Next. But what is also a side effect of people living in hard surface and you could say away from natural experiences on an everyday basis. This is a study conducted by a university in Denmark on 1 million children from being born to they were 18 years old, so formally adult. And the ones that lived in proximity and every day used green outdoor spaces, they reduced the risk of mental disorders, and that's actually the 17 largest mental disorders by 50%, 55%. And this is proved by WHO. Next. And loneliness. I mean, this is definitely a topic that is maybe, at least from my regards, some of the biggest challenges in our future cities, also during the pandemic COVID-19. People that were lonely before COVID-19 are increasing more and more loneliness. And if we stop meeting, we stop socializing, which we are at the moment globally, then we simply stop evolving as human species on this planet Earth. So I think that challenge is definitely something where we need to create spaces for informal meetings, for passing by, but also for contemplating and being outside in the cities. Next. So, considering globally, there's definitely a task at hand in our cities. Our cities covers on the global land use, or the global land area, 5%, more or less. But the emission on CO2 on a global scale comes from cities by 70%. So how do we include nature-based design in a nature-based development into that equation of a future city? It can mitigate climate adaptation, extreme weather events, microclimate, temperature, drought, overheating, also the mental part, but also the pollution from traffic. Now I think the slides went off again. Yeah, there you go. Next. You could say more than a century ago, a lot of before you could say the revolution of trains and infrastructure, all cities are actually based on very fertile land, since growing crops was part of every household. But for the last century, we have actually excluded nature as part of development in our cities. It's between land and city. And I'm very general now. I know that cities has parks and so forward. Yes? So what we consider a nature-based city is to actually include the ecosystem services into our future cities. Yes? And solving some of these challenges that I initially talked about. And on biodiversity, we divided it into what's amenity value, so hardcore mitigating CO2 emission, so lowering that by including nature in the system of the city, but also improving air quality. Nature is super smart, so we should simply just use it more, and then it creates a more livable city in general. But also you could say the amenity values of being present and being belonging, having identity and sensing and being outdoor. Yes? Creating communities. And this is just a series of images from the Nordic countries, mainly in Copenhagen, on how we work and what we celebrate in our projects. Yeah, you can shift again. So now this is just a small video on a project that we recently realized in a neighborhood in Copenhagen. And I'll let you watch it, and then I'll be back for Q&A. Thank you. I think there's no sound on it. So this is actually a transformation of a local housing street and a normal roundabout in a neighborhood in Copenhagen.
Mary, that was fascinating. I think to reimagine a city as a place that increases the ecosystem services of of any geographic area is amazing. I love the vision that you outlined, which said that cities should feel and function as a forest. Thank you so much for that
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
manifesto. I want to start my conversation with you today on that question. Tell us a bit about in what different ways can nature based design solutions have a positive impact on the big challenges that we're facing today, from the health crisis to climate change. How can a nature-based design solution be a disruptive force for better?
Well, if I should phrase it a little different, I think it's about why it should be that.
Yeah.
So what it will always be adjusted to the local context, to the local climate, to the local issues dealt with on the specific site. Soil, I mean, nature grows from soil, so the soil would also be a precondition that we needed to take care of, and we to a large extent work with kind of a context analysis before we start our work or a job anywhere. So that's one premise. Whereas maybe to answer a little bit on the why is because that we believe that there's so much to gain. There's so much added values. There's so much, so many synergies between a lot of different issues that I just touched briefly upon in the presentation that can be more or less in a banal way mitigated through including nature in the cities. And often we are asked, are there space? Are the cities not too dense, so there's no room for nature? But that's why I included that example on a normal housing street and a roundabout, where we were enabled to take out 2/3 of the asphalt, the tarmac on site, and change the terrain, so it actually not take the rain more away from the street, as we have done streets for also many decades, but that we actually can include it and use it for irrigation, but also use it for potentially the grey water management in buildings. So to regard it, yeah, does that answer maybe your question, Pratima?
You did. I think we've always thought about tackling, climate events or rain and drought in cities as an engineering problem, but like just paying attention to how nature solved those problems is a great way to address this. I just want to make sure the audio is clear because I'm losing it at some moments. Lucy, are you able to hear Mette clearly?
Yeah, there's a little bit of interference, unfortunately.
Yeah. I heard that too.
Well, maybe fingers crossed it's gone. Shall we?
It comes and goes.
Say
Magic.
something. Oh,
I'm not sure that nature can solve that part.
That's incredibly audible. Yeah, you're very audible now. Shall we
go on?
Am I audible?
Shall we continue?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Great. So my question, and I've been doing a lot of reading up on SLA. Also, I'm writing a chapter in my book on master planning futures on Copenhagen. So your fantastic nature-based approach to modern, sustainable, adaptable urban environments. Copenhagen is in the vanguard because the city created the crowd-burst master plan in response to that terrible flooding that happened 9 years ago, I think it was. But SLA's history goes back 20 years, and I understand you've based your work on a so-called new Nordic model of urban development. So collaborative, multidisciplinary, using humanistic, the nature-based solutions to solve physical, social, economic challenges in a very holistic way. And then, as you say, working really, really from local site-specific circumstances. So clearly the advantage of the model is it's very strongly based on principles and processes of nature, utility and community amenity values. And then the other thing that is pointed out in your literature is that it's very scalable for different settings and conditions around the world. That's massively helpful. So I'm very curious to know, because you and your colleagues won Arne of the Year award after Arne Jacobsen, this big award in Denmark. What convinced the judges to recognize the success that you had with your approach with the team for the project that's shown in the video, which is the excuse my Danish, Skjold Square and Briggevangen.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, the largest and greenest climate action project to date. And also, how did the community that was involved respond and understand this particular climate action of yours?
Yes, if I start with answering your last part, I think there was you were a little bit in and out, so we have to go like, maybe you have to repeat some of it, but how the local community was included. I can elaborate on that. They were part of the process initially. They were taught, included into actually the selection of a party, the vegetation and the plants. We did an initial prototyping of making understand what this was actually going to be in the end, in a realized project. And then they are included into the sharing both seeds from the plants, but also the maintenance and the everyday maintenance of the plants. So it's definitely, and right at the moment, whenever there's a vacant apartment or a house in the area, the first that the real estate owners, the real estate brokers are showing is actually that site. So it has a lot of value also on the real estate part of the area, which of course can have like a side effect on that. Then the real estate value increases, and then it's not accessible for like a diverse income set of people or families. But that's beyond our you could say way of working in that specific site.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And so the other part of the question I put to you was, what do you think convinced the judges of the Arne of the Year to give this project the Arne of the Year?
I think that I was actually showing them around on the site together with one of my colleagues who've been the site, how do you say that, the site supervisor in construction phase. Mm-hmm. There were a whole group of people, and I think that partly know that the project has can be scaled. All cities, all neighborhoods have like normal streets and roundabouts. And it also has like an immense difference. I don't know if you saw on the movie, on the small video that I just showed in the end. It's almost like bringing that sense of being in a forest or by a smaller lake. And who does not want to give that to the next generation? Who does not want to give that experience just outside your door in a city to a child, or just like for an everyday morning coffee? And what's also part of that is that selecting nature-based design is not more expensive. The hardscape is actually the more expensive part. And that's going back to the added value and the value proposition of working in that direction, or with that outset and that purpose in cities, that it has such a span of added value that is way beyond profit, but more about making our cities living worthy, you could say, if you should do another version of livable. I get a little bit tired of these words that are always used. Yeah.
Well, that sounds pretty smart to me, definitely, in all respects. So thanks very much.
Mette, I wanted to ask you a little bit about SLA's methods in dealing with extreme weather events, or climate change driven events that cities across the world continue to face, such as flooding or cloudburst events, which I know Copenhagen has had to deal with for a long time. How can you use nature-based design and integrating nature's ecosystem as services from that, to kind of tackle these ever increasing contexts?
Yes. Well, almost 40% of everything we do is on a planning scale. So it's also like initial phases of, for example, converting an industrial area into a new innovation district, or reconnecting a harbor, industry harbor, with the surrounding nature, ensuring that blue and green infrastructure is actually part of the city, and that people are connecting with the water again. So that's part of more like a planning scale than it is a project to project realization. So it's planning, but all of what we do sort of have the same purpose, to bring more nature to the people that is in the area, and bring the sensation and the feeling and the functions of nature to people and humans in general. So what we do is that we always connect and collaborate with local expertise. Around 25% of what we do is outside the Nordic countries, going to Asia, Middle East, even North America. Detroit, we are working on a social planning part in a very big district outside of Detroit. So basically, our method is more or less the same. We start with understanding and a lot of downloading, and before COVID-19, we would also go to the site. So you could say during the pandemic, we are more reliant on people with expertise on site in order to actually, you could say, customize and include our method into that specific area or the specific site. Is that a valid answer?
I'd like to push you to some of the solutions that emerged. The technical details of it.
Yes.
Of how you redesigned the plazas and the streets to, handle a cloudburst event or a flooding event. I know you showed us some images of it, but tell us a little bit in detail of how you managed to do that.
Yes, but I can do that. In St. Kjelds and Bryggervangen, the first flush of rainwater touching the tarmac or the asphalt is polluted. So that goes to a different system than the rest of it that is reused for irrigation, for example. So that's always it's not magic. It's quite you could say, straightforward a way of including water into the system of the project. So if you have like a big plaza, you could include and gather the rainwater from the roofs, have it through a natural filter in a tank underneath ground, and then reuse it. We've done a series of projects like that. Reuse it for both washing and toilet flushing in buildings, but also again reusing it for both cooling down the surfaces during a hot summer day or for irrigation of vegetation.
I remember seeing those images of what the city can look like during that extreme weather event, where you're seeing rainfalls that are almost, almost like your annual, rainfall number. So no city can be planned to, you know, discharge so much of rain. And I remember looking at your plazas, which suddenly would have become lakes, and Copenhagen suddenly looked like Venice because the streets were planned to kind of hold those water. And it was such a simple but innovative way of dealing with these types of weather events, which historically we made it into a big, expensive engineering problem by putting tons of money into building the dams, and it didn't even work.
Yes, and we actually we had a think tank because Copenhagen was hit by a 1,000-year rain event in 2011, and then it left the cities completely paralyzed for 3 to 4 days. I know to an extent that other cities like the superstorm Sandy in Manhattan, New York, it actually paralyzed the city up to more than a week. So in that respect, it's maybe a minor event here in Copenhagen, but nevertheless, it was the aftermath of that was accumulated up to like £1 billion or like 1.2 billion euros, something like that. And that was not, and part of that recovering was there was not like included like a transition or a resiliency towards the next event. So that made the peers of the city of Copenhagen think, and then they conducted this cloudburst or stormwater management plan. And it was a lot of pipes, a lot of utilities underneath surface. But in that process, they were open towards maybe we should use this type of, you could say, transforming our city, investing a lot of taxpayer money in the city, to what benefits or what does it give back to our citizens. And in that respect, we worked with the utilities, utility offices, the utilities of the city of Copenhagen, and with the peers in the city of Copenhagen, to actually include nature-based into that equation. So consider the hydraulics system in nature in that future Copenhagen, and that is where St. Kjelds and Bryggervangen is actually a pilot of that process.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
In 2018, we had like a super hot summer here in Copenhagen. It was extreme. We had like almost 3 months of no rain. And then it's also, mitigating or creating a nicer environment to actually have the coverage and have the spatial intervention of nature, creating shadow, creating a different microclimate. I guess all of you have tried to sort of walk from a plaza into like a space where there's trees and plants. I mean, the temperature drops immediately, and it's a nice comfort, and it's very different. And sometimes when we work outside the Nordic countries, it's easier to come from another country and then talk about the native species, talk about the cultural heritage there is in our nature. And nature is as it will always be local.
No, it's fascinating.
Of course, you can have a rainforest on the roof, and then you can have it like artificially make a microclimate there that where a rainforest can flourish and grow. But when we're out in the dynamics of the climate, then nature adapts and becomes local.
Yeah.
And that's again going back to should feel and function as a forest.
Yeah.
Because we don't make only cherry trees, or you need to have a robustness in the way of creating biotopes, but also in creating experiential value throughout the season and throughout the different dynamics of climate.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Lucy?
Thank you. Now, in the chat box, we've referenced your amazing SLA's amazing Cities of Nature, which has a wealth of your projects illustrated and very fascinating texts about it. 2016, it was produced. So we see projects like Ringkabing, for which your principle you state is nature and really strong social communities come before buildings and infrastructure. And very interestingly, also the principles for climate adaptation and urban nature, the Copenhagen models, so as it's so described, are explained, which says Copenhageners are the co-creators of future urban nature. Now that's pretty radical, but in a way, it's actually should be that way for the whole of the world. And so you obviously combine social, biological, hydrological ambitions in your projects in very symbiotic ways. So that public urban spaces are, they're very highly livable, to use that very well-used phrase, but with a very strong sense of community ownership. So what would be really interesting to know is how do you actually go about setting up these very community-focused projects to ensure these kind of outcomes? So, for example, one project I read about was South Boulevard in Vesterbro, which had a very strong community participation process, I understand, and included some space that left vacant for the evolution of the community, their own activities in the future.
Yeah, with regards to Sønder Boulevard, it's a project that we realized 13 years ago. But we were quite clear in the beginning of this strong local community that they were experts in their daily lives at that time.
Yeah.
At that we were expert in spatial planning and designing, with an outset on their wishes, of course. But if we were the experts on doing that, so they shouldn't design it and then we were just realizing their wishes. So it had to be sort of a constructive and common dialogue, that process. And then we were also clear about that if we just filled out all their wishes, then the project would lack of the potential of nudging and pushing forward what we don't know yet. So it was very important it's a super banal plan, and we talk about it internally. If that was a competition, we would never have won that competition, because it's almost like these Tetris games. It's basically a disposal of the area, sanitizing the traffic, so there's a little bit more space in the center space of the boulevard, and then including that into a series of different spaces that was under the working phrase of making another living room to the small apartments that is in the local area. It's an old workers district, so the apartments are mainly 2 rooms. So if we should just like have done what they wished for, then it would have been a lot of barbecues, up to 5 different table tennis, you could say, tabletops, and then what? Whereas this was actually something that was inviting people to meet, to walk the dog, to have like a more silent meeting, a more just contemplative, being present in some part of it. Another area of it was more open, and all of a sudden there was a flea market, a local flea market. But the idea was here to really sort of start with the local residents and understanding their everyday life in order to create a flexible framework that nudge future life in the city.
And yeah, fantastic. And also in the process gave them a sense of real ownership of their own spaces.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
there's this space is really designed for smaller meetings and maybe a small flea market. But there's a super rock star, Medina, a Danish one, and she chose to have her concert on this part. In this part of the city, and it's definitely not designed for that. So it had something else to it. So she wanted to do it right there.
Yeah, spontaneity and impromptu scenarios are often quite welcome. Thank you. Prathima?
Mette, I want to talk to you a little bit about biomimicry and nature-based solutions and why they are more and more crucial to the agenda of a resilient city. And talk to our audience a little bit about what we mean by biomimicry. You just mentioned in our earlier conversation on how landscape can't just be decorative, right? Like it has to be diverse. It has to be indigenous species to function, to deliver those ecosystem functions. So give us an example of that and explain to us why these tactics are more and more crucial for the resilient city agenda.
Yeah. If you use landscaping and planting and vegetation as a part of a decoration, then there's like a lot of issues you could sort of attach on that you could say that perspective on nature in cities. First of all, it's based on a visual impression, not a sensuous one. And we as people, we are of living matter. We are breathing, and we are alive, and so is nature. So if you go outside into the woods and into the forest or into this to the coast, it is changing every time you go. I don't know, and I think that at least here in the Nordic countries, as what I've read, is that people tend to seek into nature and also nature-based spaces during the pandemic to sort of have like a comfort, but also to connect with something that is living. And there's a lot of research that sort of points out that makes us more comfort. It gives us more comfort. It makes us relax. It even increases concentration level. Whereas if you imagine like a big, I also love flowers. I love colors. So it's not that colors and decorations is not part of it, but it's just it's just too simple. There's so much more to it if you spread it out and look at it more locally and more like in biotopes. Then you can even have like different faunas being part of your everyday experience in the city. So biomimicry is for us, we don't mimic nature. We try to understand, and it's not only internally at SLA, it's also with a lot of academia, researchers, experts outside of SLA, that we are learning and creating new knowledge together with. So we are definitely not alone on this agenda. Another perspective to it is that we increasingly are hiring other disciplines. So we have a whole interdisciplinary team that includes PhDs, but also so they are conducting research, but there's also anthropologists looking at the social agenda of cities and transformation of cities. We also have a series of biologists, so making baseline registration in order to sort of measure on that if a site should actually has and Skjold has that agenda as a start. How can we actually collect and measure the baseline in order to sort of follow the increase in biodiversity, plants and species, and so on, flora, fauna.
And this is crucial to the agenda of a resilient city as well, which is going to be one of the key ingredients of a successful city in the future because of all the big challenges we face today.
Yes, I agree.
Lucy?
Well, absolutely. The nature in the cities, or the towns or the villages or wherever it is close to people, has been absolute lifeline during the pandemic. And nature inside people's apartments and houses too, because I think people have been buying a lot more houseplants. It's just, the physical and mental health benefits are just immeasurable. So we know that across cities, some cities are in the vanguard, like Copenhagen, absolutely. And I know in my home city of London, the specific boroughs are very, very advanced in their commissioning of green infrastructure and SUDS design and so on, as part of a very holistic approach to to resilience, to the whole issue of biodiversity and building up nature as a real resource for social benefit, ecological and economic. Now, many municipalities are really not in that very fortunate position. They're still trying to learn, and some of them haven't done very much at all. I mean, this is the reality. So what do you see? How can we persuade people who run local governments who are not yet on the curve to really take steps? What are the top priorities they need to actually implement, to take far more radical action, to put nature at the forefront of their public space plans and follow your good examples?
Well, there's always some people that you cannot win, and they don't have the same, are not on the same page as you are.
I know.
But I think it's like you're doing at the Urban Vision, that dialogue, showing examples, understanding their issues, maybe putting it differently. Because I know that Copenhagen, that's one city where you could take Mumbai, for example. That's a different world, you could say, than the understanding of. So one thing is that you could start just with like baby steps, and that's what we do. I mean, that's what we do in general. Sometimes we we of course meet people that doesn't believe in the same perspective and the same approach that we do. But in general, through dialogue, it's something that people can connect to, and it's something that people have like a personal experience from, and then we start from there. And some of the issues that we are met with in for example municipalities is the maintenance cost. Oh, now all that nature, we need to maintain it a lot, and that will cost a lot of money, and we don't have any money, we don't have any budget for that type of iteratively changing our city and so forward. But then you sort of start to ask questions. Well, don't you cut your lawns? Do you cut them 25 times a year, mainly during summer season, autumn and spring? And that even costs money, and it takes time. So it's, yeah. Is that sometimes we do meet cities that are not interested, but mainly we meet the cities that are interested, you could say. So maybe we are a little bit fortunate.
Yeah. And after all cities, they all have bills to pay for public health. This is a very holistic argument and an evolutionary kind of situation. But, alternative models that benefit people's health in the long run are going to be hugely, take the pressure off the health services in some forms, for sure.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, also there's a huge cost, a huge benefit to having better psychological health from people having better access to nature. But yeah, I mean, we're preaching to the converted here in some respects. So,
yes,
we just need to carry on sharpening the arguments. Anyway, that's
we do.
Yeah. So
we need to do it collectively.
Yeah, collectively, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pratima?
I just want to take a quick moment to say hello to the amazing audience that joins in and tunes in to watch Urban Manifesto every week. And if you have any comments or questions, please post it on the video box below, and we'll try to take a few. Mette, my next question to you is, how are you approaching the challenges of enabling people of all ages and background to experience nature in the city in an innovative way through the green and blue nature-based urban design solutions that you have worked on in your project?
That's a super nice. That's a very good question, Pratima. But basically, again, I mean, we have in the Nordic countries, we are in general able to move safe in our cities. So green is a part of the public. It's accessible for the public in general. So it's not privatized. Of course, there's private gardens, but that's a different perspective to it. Whereas if you, for example, go to Detroit, then you need to understand the local way of moving around in the city. You need to understand the certain situation, and then slightly bend it. So we can't just take a project from, for example, Copenhagen and then export it to, let's say, Detroit or even Mumbai. We would need to sort of be adjusted locally to the situation there. We have recently made a park in a social challenged neighborhood from the heydays of modernism. Where there's around 70 different nationalities in all ages, mainly young people from, I think 25% is teenagers, so around 12 to 18 years. And how do you sort of make a more safe environment and a more safe move and accessibility, mobility in an area like that? And there's generally there's something about light when it's dark hours or if it's night. There's something about visibility and connection between different spaces, so you have like the view to the next stop, so there's no hideouts in the park. So that's some suggestions to what you are asking for, Pratima.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a fun city to live in, and I hope we have more of these kind of thinking.
You should come and visit us again.
No, it's time for you to come here.
Yeah, it's true. It's my turn.
Get out of where I am and just go back to.
I would love to.
Jesus, yeah.
As we just talked about it this morning, that we really miss traveling.
Yeah.
You can, to a certain extent, you can do a lot of different issues online. Yeah. But there's also the whole inspiration and the whole being physical on site in a different environment, in a different city with other perspectives. It's one thing is that you become more local, but you also have, at least from my own perspective, have a tendency of being more locally in the way of thinking. So it's so nice to be part of this webinar in that respect. But it's also we are really sort of eager to. We miss traveling. Basically, that's what we do. I know there's a greater goodness for the climate in general, but there's also a perspective to
experiencing real world.
Yeah. My partner Rasmus Astrup, he just some after summer had this communal meeting with in Detroit on this district that we are working with, and then this fantastic woman started the whole session with a big hat and red lips and like almost starting to sing. So I think there's also like iterations to be done in the way of curating and also talking online. So there's definitely also something that we could do to a larger extent there, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely. So I think we've just got a few minutes left. So I want to squeeze in this question about every other article talking about the pandemic has discussed this so-called 15-minute neighborhood. So do you see a rise in 15-minute neighborhoods in cities globally really genuinely being implemented after all this discussion? And how can SLA's approach contribute to the success of this particular approach to urbanism? Because 15-minute neighborhoods have huge advantages, much greater access to nature being one of them, and very cohesive. And what do you think?
Definitely. We just discussed that the other day, and we have a series of urban planning projects that we are working on as we speak. And there is the 15-minute, but we are actually trying to push it a little. Could it be could it be 10 minutes, or some kind of, because to some extent you also want diversity in the value in the city. To sort of create this local sense of belonging, but also in the end wayfinding and sort of differences and difference in experience and so forth. But the 15 minutes city definitely has an agenda, and we are working with it as we speak on a lot of different sites. But we also like to challenge it a little bit.
That sounds very healthy to me. Yes, I think definitely they should be differentiated. I mean, I'm completely against any kind of cut and paste urbanism, as
and
I know.
homogenic, yeah.
Yeah, homogeneous kind of approach.
Homogeneous, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, so Prathama, do we have time for one more question, or that would be for you to judge and ask?
Okay, we maybe have a couple of minutes if Mette
Yeah.
can stay for a couple of minutes more. Remember walking into your studio and was fascinated by your extensive material library. It was amazing to see different kinds of sand and soil from different parts of the world in the studio. So tell us a bit about what are the creative ways in which you use your extensive material collection to to design, and how does that kind of process allow you to develop concepts, and why is that process so crucial to delivering what you do?
Well, first of all, it's for everyday inspiration.
Yeah.
We can't help it. I'm a generalist. I would say I'm a leader, but we have a lot of nerds at SLA, and we consider nerds as super valuable. So they are, when we talk about different pine needles in different stages of decay, included into the natural succession of a specific site, or just a pine wood forest, then there's something at stake, and then you see light in their eyes. So sometimes we also include a client into this sort of sensuous feeling of a limestone that is white. It has a sort of a matte, not a slick or a reflecting surface, but still it reflects daylight because that it's white. So it's to create a studio where that type of inspiration is on the shelves, and we have an extensive library, and the library consists of a lot of different, but mainly it has a lot on Japanese culture and natural nature understanding, and philosophy on nature, and also Chinese culture and history. And then, of course, a lot of inspirational books and so forth. And it's all listed so we can all read from the library. But you're not allowed to take it home, because then it all sort of disappears in a minute. But we try to sort of to create a safe and an inspirational studio where that is part of the everyday.
Thank you, Mette. This has been such a fascinating conversation, and I hope Lucy and I can come and see you at some point soon in Copenhagen to look at some of these.
You're more than welcome.
You have created there.
But I should come and visit you first, Prathama.
You're always welcome, Mette.
And come to London as well. Mette, it's been fascinating. It's been really wonderful. Landscape architects are real activists. I know this because my mother is a landscape architect.
You say this so late.
Yeah. Yeah, she originally worked for the Department of the Environment until it became privatized. And so she worked in the private sector, but leading a team of about 12 young landscape architects. Now they are super nerdy, but in the best possible way. They're very research driven. They're very meticulous, very methodical, but they are very visionary as well. I've worked with Grossmax, the Scottish Dutch practice, who are really wild and wonderful people. But that you really have light in your eyes, as you said earlier on, and the power of nature is our friend. It's going to be with us. It's our friend in the midst of all these traumas and crises. So thank you so much, and I hope that all the audience really equally enjoyed learning more about your wonderful practice. Let me just quickly.
I learned from talking with you too.
Oh, great. It's mutually beneficial. Yeah, we really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So let me quickly introduce next week's session on the 8th of December, Tuesday. You know the times. I won't repeat them. With Alessandra Cianchetta, the Italian architect who's based her office AWP, AWILDC, lot of big acronym, based in London and in New York. And with Alessandra, we'll be exploring the good life, new models of architecture and urbanism. And I know we will go into landscape because Alessandra, whilst not being a landscape architect, very much works so closely with landscape practices, and her work hugely benefits, her urban design work benefits from it. This holistic approach, which we need so much. Okay, so thank you very